Today is the 20th of December, 2016. The topic is the consequences of Donald Trump's electoral victory on U.S. foreign policy, Part 3. This has been a long discussion of the foreign policy problem. And our moderator is Steve Antle, and he will ask both Dave DeWitt and I in this Athens Speakout number 393. Okay, Steve, you're on.
Okay, I'm going to go with David here first.
Okay.
And the topic's still the consequences, the
topic
Donald
is clear. Right.
Trump's electoral victory.
Right.
I don't know that we've finished up on, and do you have any further comments on why you think Trump won and Hillary lost?
Oh, not specifically on why the election turned out the way that it did. I do think that it's interesting to note that the Electoral College did cast their votes yesterday, Monday, December 19th, and Donald Trump now is officially President-elect of the United States. And it looked like the so-called Hamilton electors, which is, of course, a reference to Alexander Hamilton's Federalist Paper number 68, where he outlined the reasoning behind the Electoral College. The so-called Hamilton electors did not wage any sort of significant coup against Donald Trump as president. Everyone pretty much voted as expected. There were actually more unfaithful electors for Hillary Clinton than there were for Donald Trump. So that brings us up to date as to where we stand now.
Okay. Yeah, I believe that I heard where some of the original Hillary voters had gone, some of them to Sanders.
For Bernie, yeah.
Yeah. And then
Faithless
they were
electors,
they
that's what they're
were
called.
kind of pressured to go back to their original vote, you know.
Right.
So I don't know in the end how many people actually did change their vote, because perhaps Dr. Whaley could tell us why there's pressure put on these people to stay with their original vote as far as an elector is concerned.
Well, in 99 times out of 100, the state law binds the electors to vote the way the popular vote went. There were only two exceptions to that rule. The Gore-Bush in 2000, where there was a controversy, and it was decided by the Supreme Court of the United States over the objections of Gore that Bush won it. But that was a debatable decision.
Yeah.
And the other one was the Hayes-Tilden election of 1876, in which it didn't go to the Supreme Court. It went to the two parties because the Democrats had a big majority in the Senate. And Hayes won the Electoral College, so he officially became president. But the Democrats got something out of it. They said, well, from now on, the occupying armies left over from the Civil War, in which the Republicans had set up black legislators in South Carolina and ran satellite states, essentially. Mm-hmm. You got to take that army home, and we're going to have a new Reconstruction. And the Democratic Southern senators will now vote in the white primary, and the Southern senators from then on until 1948 usually voted a straight Democratic ticket, and the Republican Party had no chance from then on in the Southern states. And that was the compromise of the Hayes-Tilden election. Okay. Half of the Republicans, they got the presidency, but the South, in a sense, won a Pyrrhic victory by getting rid of the occupation army, and the white South was white and segregated until 1948.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's kind of a footnote to what I wanted to get into. But in any case, going back to my introduction, I would say that this is the third part of a lengthy problem of the history of American foreign policy, which goes back to World War II, to illustrate that Donald Trump does not have the experience to have, at this time, a well-developed, coherent foreign policy. And right now, no one knows whether the Syrian war will continue for another year or 5 years or 10 years or what will happen to Syria. It's an open ball game. We also do not know what's going to happen between the United States and Russia, and whether the Putin problem will get worse or better, and that's what's going to be happening in the next administration. So, Trump did decide to appoint Rex Tillerson as the chief executive officer from ExxonMobil as his Secretary of State. And that puts big oil in the saddle. And this is unprecedented. The Anglo-American cartel, oil cartel, from 1927 to 1970 had a great influence on foreign policy. But it was only an influence. It was one factor. The problem now is, will big oil become the number one influence? Now, Nelson Rockefeller from Standard Oil of New Jersey, which was the senior oil company of the 7 Standard Oil companies, which were broken up in 1911. Anyway, the senior company, Standard Oil of New Jersey, had an oligopoly called the Seven Sisters. And Roosevelt appointed, a Democratic president, appointed Rockefeller as his assistant Secretary of State for Latin America, all during World War II. And the reason for that is that Latin America had several oil-producing countries, Colombia, Venezuela, and Mexico, and Roosevelt needed to have a bipartisan foreign policy in order to keep oil in his control, along with Great Britain and the Soviet Union, because oil was a key commodity to defeat the Axis powers. Anyway, the Shell Standard Cartel was founded in 1927 as one of the major factors in why the British and the Americans won World War II. The Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, had to import all of their petroleum products from one of the Seven Sister Companies because they controlled 90% of the whole world's oil. The other 10% was controlled by the Soviet Union. Well, fortunately for the United States and Britain, the Soviet Union came onto the side of the Anglo-American cartel, and oil was one of the major factors in defeating the whole Axis in World War II. So, in January of 1942, right after Pearl Harbor, a new United Nations alliance was signed in Washington between Great Britain, the United States, and Soviet Foreign Minister V.M. Molotov, because Stalin was so afraid of assassination he would never leave the Soviet Union. So the three-power alliance pledged to fight Nazi Germany and not make a separate peace until Adolf Hitler was defeated. And these three powers then marched to Berlin, installed a new democratic government replacing Hitler's Nazis. Now, Roosevelt knew the importance of oil and appointed Rockefeller to control Latin America in order to keep the Allies winning.
Robert, can we come back to that because you've exceeded your 2 minutes?
Okay, thank you very much.
David, would you like to comment on the appointment of Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State?
Well, it was a little disappointing to me because I was hoping that perhaps President-elect Trump would what I viewed as a more reasonable decision and appoint John Huntsman. But I think
Wait
that
a minute. Who's John Huntsman?
John Huntsman was,
He ran for president.
yeah, he's a former governor of New Mexico. He was President Obama's ambassador to China. He was a dark horse candidate for Secretary of State. I don't think he was ever really truly at the top of President-elect Trump's list. Rex Tillerson, I think, is interesting, especially in light of the history that you're sharing.
Why would Huntsman be better? I don't quite follow the logic here. Why would Huntsman be a better Secretary of State, in your opinion?
I like his experience dealing with China.
With China?
Yes.
I don't think China is a major oil power.
Well, no.
So you're saying you can pit China against the oil cartel? Is that what you're saying? You want China to be on America's side against the oil cartel? How does it help America?
Yeah, I don't think we were necessarily talking about oil.
Yeah,
you know, as Secretary of State, he's going to be dealing with all these nations, and Huntsman as a governor
and a former diplomat. His
yeah,
previous
he
diplomatic
had the experience. Whereas Rex
okay.
Tillerson, sure, he's negotiated deals with oil companies and oil countries, but he's been pretty much limited to that. You know, whereas
he's an oil expert, right?
Huntsman actually does have some political expertise.
In what field? I don't understand it.
Diplomacy.
What did he do in China that makes him an expert on China?
Well, part of what
Did he
he's
just pass
been
paper around?
well, what his diplomatic experience to me is advantageous in that he knows the various agreements that are being worked on with regard to China, with regard to the power in the region, the moves that Europe is currently trying to make, the deals,
Okay, have
the
you
trade
read
impacts.
a book of his memoirs or something? Where do you get this information from?
By following his career since he first ran for president in 2008 and then joined the Obama administration.
I would like to hear more about that career, because to me it's a mystery.
Sure, yeah.
Okay,
well,
give me a little sketch.
Google. Oh, you want me to go over his career right now?
What do you know about this governor of New Mexico? What do you know?
Well,
okay.
What would you like me to tell you about
You like
his
him better
career?
than Tillerson. I find him a question mark. I don't know if
Okay.
he'd be better or worse. I have no
Well, I don't
idea.
know if he'd be better or worse either, but I
Okay.
prefer his diplomatic experience.
His experience. What is his experience?
He was ambassador to China under the Obama administration. He's got experience working with the European allies and NATO with regard to the trade agreements that are being negotiated both by Europe and within the Asian countries, and the ones being considered by the Obama administration in the Asian countries.
You might be right. I just don't know.
Well,
I find it a mystery.
if I was to answer that question, I would say that Rex Tillerson's experience basically has been in the oil industry and with nothing else other than that, as far as dealing with foreign countries.
Well, Standard Oil has their own embassy system in hundreds of companies.
Oh,
they
that's
have
true,
a
that's
bigger
true,
bureaucracy than the whole State Department. So Tillerson has 100% more experience in foreign affairs than this governor of New Mexico.
I was unaware of that.
Well, there's an oil company in.
Oh yes, of
there's a
course,
Standard
of
Oil
course.
in
Any of the
90
major oil companies are going to have.
That's why Rockefeller was
have,
important to Roosevelt.
Well, that's true.
Diplomatic
There's
experience.
yeah.
And let's take Henry Kissinger.
Well, no, Tillerson doesn't have any formal diplomatic experience.
Neither did Henry Kissinger, but he had some experience for Standard Oil.
Yeah, I'm not denying that he has experience advocating for the profit-driven motives of Exxon.
Okay.
I'm saying that he doesn't have any official diplomatic State Department experience, which John Huntsman did.
Okay, well, we're going to leave that for the future, because I find him a total mystery to me. But in any case...
It doesn't matter because John Huntsman didn't get the position.
Go ahead.
All right, okay. I'm going to get back to what I do know is something about the foreign policy of Roosevelt and Stalin and Hitler and how the United States won World War II through the power of oil. So I think that Tillerson will make a competent Secretary of State. And I don't see a better nominee on the horizon other than Tillerson. I think he's better than Petraeus. I think he's better than Giuliani.
Better than Romney.
Better than Romney.
I
think
agree.
Those were all wild cards. And as far as I know, this guy from New Mexico is a wild card, as far as I know. Now, maybe.
Well, I don't think you follow John Huntsman, but he's been around. He's been in politics.
I
for
don't know
quite
a
a
thing
while.
about it.
Yes, he began his career as a White House staff assistant in the Reagan administration.
Okay.
He helped negotiate China's entrance into the World Trade
All right, now
Organization
that
under
may
George
be a
W.
fact.
Bush.
All right, okay.
And he was governor of Utah, excuse me. I
Okay,
believe I said
governor of
New
Utah.
Mexico.
Okay.
That's right.
He helped negotiate this trade deal with China. He got China into the world. You're saying he was key to China joining the World Trade?
In 2001,
Yeah.
yeah, he launched those negotiations to get China into the World Trade Organization.
Okay.
That was
So he's had some experience.
before he spent time as Obama's ambassador to China.
Ambassador to China. So he was served both Democrats and Republicans.
He did, yes.
He has a bipartisan career.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's an asset.
It doesn't matter because he didn't get the position. Rex Tillerson
It
did.
clarifies
so,
the issue a little bit. Let's say he had some qualifications.
yeah.
Okay. So anyway, getting back to World War II, and I was talking about the power of Anglo-American oil and Soviet oil, we might add a little footnote about General Franco. General Franco was a quasi-fascist regime power in 1939 after winning the Spanish Civil War, and Spain too was lacking oil. And the British and Americans came together over Spain long before World War II officially opened. And they were checking the possibility of the Nazis picking up oil from the Canary Islands and using them for German submarines. And there was always a suspicion of the quasi-alliance between Franco and the Axis. Okay, so that was a little footnote to the importance of oil and anti-communism and the diplomacy of World War II. So Spain then was 3/4 of an island, and the British and American navies imposed a blockade on oil products beginning in September of 1939 when Hitler attacked Poland. So Franco was neutral on the Western Front toward Britain and the United States and Germany. And he was assisting Germany with military aid to defeat Stalin. The Blue Division. He sent a Blue Division to help Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
So Franco was always suspect by the United States, and he was hated by the Soviet Union.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, right.
because of what he did to the communists in
So
Spain.
the policy of Franco's Spain is as quasi-fascist, has always been a great debate. Anyway,
Oh, you don't... What do you mean quasi-fascist? You don't think he was full-on
okay,
fascist?
there's a slight difference.
Okay,
Let's talk about Mussolini and Hitler.
right. Well, there's a difference between those two as well.
They had some minor differences, but they had 7 major agreements. They believed in dictatorship. They believed in imperialism. They believed in anti-communism. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They believed in autarky, self-sufficiency. They were hostile to the Anglo-American, what they call plutocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They were not laissez-faire. Okay.
No, not at all.
Okay. So these were the characteristics of fascism. And the major importance of fascism is a Manichaean ideology. A Manichaean knows what he's against, but he doesn't know what he's for. Anti-communism is much more unified than to be pro-democracy.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be debate. What is democracy? How do you define democracy? But Hitler was able to use anti-communism to win allies. Spain, Hungary, Romania, and even Neville Chamberlain did not want to go to war against Hitler because of this anti-communist, Manichaean, consistent, ideological, one way of thinking, Manichaean.
So in what way?
Black and white world.
So how does Franco fail to live up to that cut?
There were two differences. Two differences. Franco was a theoretical imperialist, but he was not interested in active imperialism. Where was he imperialist against? Morocco? What was going to be his reward? Well, Hitler could always use Mussolini to take over Morocco. He didn't need Franco for Morocco, okay? The other problem was Franco was very loyal to the Roman Catholic Church. Hitler and Mussolini and the true fascist is anti-clerical.
Right.
Okay, and had no sympathy with the Catholic Church other than propaganda. Okay, so the fascists like Goebbels and Hitler himself were former Catholics, but Franco was always loyal
He was a practicing.
to his mother and his wife and the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church was a kind of a helped the British subvert Franco through the monarchy. Okay? The British used the monarchy to help Spain maintain its neutrality toward the... And Hitler didn't have a monarch. And that was one of the weaknesses of Italian fascism, because they still had a monarch. But that monarch was ineffective anyway. And Mussolini made Victor Emmanuel a puppet king anyway. So I would say that Hitler and Mussolini were both true 100% fascists. And Franco used this monarchy to escape from penalties after Hitler and Mussolini were dead. The first thing he did was to call a referendum. What happens to Franco? And he put a referendum in Spain. What happens? I am the chief of state, and I remain the chief of state until my death. And upon my death, it goes back to the Spanish monarchy royal house. And that's how Juan Carlos became the democratic leader of Spain after Franco died in 1975. So the monarchy and the power of the monarchy and the power of the church are two ways out in the balance of power from being a complete, total 100% fascist. So I call him a quasi-fascist.
I see.
Okay. But he was 70% fascist.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was fairly well authoritarian, but I understand your explanation as far as calling him a quasi.
Okay. Well, anyway,
fascist.
that just clarifies something that I'm a little bit of an expert on. How the Spanish Civil War led to the first round in World War II. That's the thesis of the
Right.
book.
You wrote a book on it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm going off the topic a little bit. But anyway, I guess I wanted to say anything about this. Franco, that's a dead issue. The last time we discussed the complex balance of power of World War II, we had not yet concluded the story down to 1945, and that is the task today. Remembering the problems of World War II, the combined armies of Britain, the Commonwealth, United States, the Norwegians, the Poles, the Belgians, the Dutch, who had exiled governments in London. All of these little powers invaded France on the 6th of June, 1944, to reconquer France from across the English Channel. And it was the major battle of the United States and Britain in World War II. Okay. So the big three armies in 1944 were closing in on Hitler's Germany on two fronts. And the Soviet Union reached Hitler's bunker when the Fuhrer committed suicide on the 30th of April, 1945. And General Eisenhower for the Americans and British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery wanted to save American lives and deliberately allowed Stalin to get into Berlin first. So the U.S. and Britain had no need to rush into Berlin, and that was a military decision at the end of World War II that left the United States as the number one power and the Soviet Union as number two, and Great Britain, not admitting it, was no longer a great power. So from 1945 to 56, Britain still had enough power to be called the third great power. But that was over the objections of Winston Churchill, who was the author of the whole balance of power system and kept the Americans and the Soviets in one single alliance. Churchill was key for the diplomacy and the timing of World War II. So the withdrawal of the French Empire and the British Empire as a result of the Suez Crisis in Egypt in 1956 spelt the end of Europe's domination of Africa. And Britain and the Commonwealth became dependent on American subsidies from 1945 to the present time. Now, let's get back to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is 67 years old, and it is doubtful that he has learned...
He's 70 years old.
Yeah, he's 70.
70?
Yes.
Where did I
Yeah.
get 67?
He was born in 46.
Yeah, okay. Well, somehow I got it wrong. Maybe it's Hillary who's 67.
69.
I think she's, yeah, 69.
Okay, well, that's a mistake. That comes from senility. Anyway, it's a technical mistake. Anyway, Donald Trump is 70 years old, and it's doubtful that he learned any history about World War II, which was a partial victory for Franklin Roosevelt. Trump was born the son of a rich real estate dealer in New York in June 1946, as President Truman was looking for a new foreign policy in face of the Chinese Revolution. Now, Stalin was a weak empire behind the Iron Curtain. Stalin occupied 7 or 8 countries in Eastern Europe, including the East German Republic, the Democratic Republic, and the DDR. But that was only a temporary Soviet zone in the eyes of the West and Eastern Germany, but it lasted from 1945 to the 1970s. So there was a long ideological war called the Cold War from 45 to 91, in which the Soviet Union and the United States did not directly go to war, but both powers intervened in peripheral nations to install protectorates or satellite regimes, and that led to the Korean War, 1950 to 53. It was a stalemate. No one won any victory. Neither the People's Republic of China, nor Stalin's Soviet Union, nor Secretary of State Dean Acheson.
On that note, Robert, we need to take a station break.
Okay, station break. Well, I'll finish this sentence.
Okay.
And anyway, Dean Acheson was the one who decided to intervene in the Korean Civil War on behalf of an amateur president, Harry S. Truman, and he could not claim victory either. Now the break. My name is Robert Whaley. I'm a historian, retired historian from Ohio University, and my colleague here is David DeWitt from the Athens News, and he's got the future in mind. of what's going to happen next year, and I have the past of how the past molds Donald Trump's possibilities. So the United States, getting back now to the theme, learned little from the Korean War and intensified its anti-communist ideology for the next war. Yes.
Okay, Robert, let's hear something from David.
Okay.
I could, I suppose to continue on that theme as far as getting into the Korean War, which was in the middle of the Cold War and then led into the Vietnam War eventually. It was an interesting. What do you think of the domino theory that was proposed as far as the rationale? Because we got into this, there's been the point made that Harry Truman and subsequently Dwight Eisenhower saw the Cold War or the anti-communist sentiment as a motivating political force, not necessarily a direct threat. But by the time the 60s came around, leaders were actually buying into this threat, and they thought that the domino theory with the if Vietnam fell, then countries would fall, and eventually the world would fall to communism, and that's what led to this, the fog of war that McNamara referred to.
Well, as far as I know, the domino theory was invented by Eisenhower and John Foster Dulles, and it was just that, a theory, and it was based on the appeasement problem of Neville Chamberlain. Hitler won his balance of power game step by step. First he invaded the Rhineland, then he intervened in Spain, then he took over Austria, then he took over Sudetenland, then he took over the rest of the Czechoslovak state, then he moved into Poland. So he was a long way using coercive diplomacy until the Polish campaign, when he was forced to go to war outright with Britain and France, and World War II officially begins, right? So war is a shooting war. There was a real World War II. There was a real Spanish Civil War. The Cold War is simply a metaphor. It was invented by Walter Lippmann, a journalist, in 1947. And he said, well, the United States is between being anti-fascist and anti-communist. This is a shadow called the Cold War. But the Cold War was never a shooting war. The United States and the Soviet Union never went to war. It was a metaphor. It was a disguised piece of propaganda. Instead of saying anti-communism, you could justify the Cold War. And they didn't want to say anti-communism because that was Hitler and Mussolini's thing.
Because they were
and the United States didn't want to confess, well, it's going to become another fascist power. So they invented, or let's say, this idea of Walter Lippmann invented a cliche that worked in journalism from 1947 and was finally ended officially by George Bush 41 in 1991, in which he said the Cold War is over, after they had atomic nuclear disarmament treaties. So the Cold War confuses politicians between the arms race, between, what was the Cold War? It was between the United States and China, between the United States and Soviet Union. How many actors were in the Cold War?
Well, what do you make of this business now with President-elect Trump and Russia? It wasn't too long ago that we saw a lot of Republicans criticizing President Obama quite harshly for his so-called Russian reset, where he wanted to reset relations with Russia and Vladimir Putin on better footing. But now that Donald Trump seems to be presenting the same type of posture toward Russia, at least a more cooperative posture toward Russia, we're seeing a lot of people get on board with that. And now I'm not suggesting that hypocrisy in politics is anything new, but what do you make of this?
What I make of this is that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama know practically nothing about Russia or the Ukraine and would be rather stupid in getting into a war over who's going to control the Ukraine. They don't have any history. That's the whole thesis of what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Kissinger had history. Roosevelt had history. Stalin had history.
Does Tillerson have the history?
I don't know, but right now he has a lot of oil diplomacy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how far he understands the whole balance of power is a question mark.
How does the oil question get into where the relationship with Russia needs to go?
Okay, the United States has the power to manipulate the value of the dollar because the OPEC countries and the Seven Sisters cartel was redesigned by the Middle East countries.
Mm-hmm.
In 1970, the 1927 oil oligopoly was through.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Saudis and the Iraqis and the Iranians said, look, we have as much oil in the ground that we can buy these Americans out. We can nationalize the oil. So they started raising the price. It used to be $1 a barrel, wholesale, $1 a barrel from 1927 to 1970. Never changed. And this financed the tire revolution, the automobile revolution, and made the United States an automobile country, and made Europe an oil country. Okay. Well, the Saudis, the Iranians, together formed a new cartel called the Organization of Petroleum Export Countries.
Right.
And it was originally an idea of Gaddafi. Gaddafi said, well, let's raise it to $3 a barrel. And the United States can't do anything about it because the United States began to import oil. The Anglo-American cartel was based on the theory that Texas had surplus oil in the ground. So if Mexico gives you trouble, the Americans could pick up the slack. If Iran gives you trouble, the Americans can pick up the slack and supply Britain, who's oil dependent. The British they didn't have any oil up until the North Sea, but they didn't have any oil. They had to import it all from Latin America or Indonesia or the Middle East or someplace, okay? So the balance of power changed within the oil industry. So the dollar was getting into trouble in 1970, and it was dependent on the American-Saudi relationship because Aramco, the American oil company in Saudi Arabia, was owned by 4 American companies: Texaco, Standard Oil of New Jersey, Standard Oil of California, and Standard Oil of New York.
Mm-hmm.
And they left the British out. Now the British had their own oil monopoly, BP in Iran. So together, the Anglo-Americans controlled the Middle East oil, okay? But now in 70, you have the energy crisis. And Carter was left holding the bag because the oil powers, OPEC, could drive inflation. So when they raised the price of oil to $3, the banks in New York simply said, all right, and the Wall Street says, all right, we raised the price of steel. We raised the price of automobiles. Everything that they have to import, we raise. So this was an inflation decade from 1970 to 1982. Now, the bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, Paul Volcker broke the back of the cartel because they divided Saudi Arabia from Iran and Iraq.
Right.
Because Saudi Arabia wanted to play ball with the American bank and said,
Right.
look, inflation is not going to do us any good because what can we do with all of the gold? We can buy hotels in New York. We can buy hotels in London. But we don't want any more raising of the price. Iran needed to raise the price because they were in conflict with Iraq and the other Middle East countries. So they said, let's keep raising the price. So there was a little bit of a competition, and they had a falling out of how they would set the prices.
Yeah.
And the banks then were able to change the balance of power.
Well, and this is all very much a part of what we're still dealing with today.
This is economic power.
With Iran allied with Russia
Okay.
for on many things, and,
Okay.
and the United States allied with Saudi Arabia still
Right.
on many things. And
Right.
then, of course, Iran and Saudi Arabia's
Okay.
conflicts between Sunnis and Shiites.
Okay.
This seems like a very complex situation for the
Okay.
next administration to be
We
walking
have to go
into.
back to my famous box here. The military factor, the economic factor, the political factor, and the ideological, philosophical, moral factors.
Mm-hmm.
And only a guy like Roosevelt or Stalin or Churchill can put the four sides of the dilemma together. And they see that you got to deal with four elites.
Well, they're all dead, though. We're going to need someone to step up,
Well,
are we
Kissinger's
not?
still alive, and there's been a story that maybe Donald Trump is listening to Kissinger.
Well, that is
Donald Trump
interesting.
may discover the balance of power through Kissinger. That's going to be the next 2 years to see whether he does or not.
And then we've got the Syrian business as well.
Well, that's due to imperialism. What I'm saying is the Korean War was a mistake. The Vietnam War was a mistake. Bush's war in 2000 to 2008 was a mistake. They were fighting for imperial objectives. And the United States does not have the manpower or the money to control and occupy all of those Middle East countries.
No, I shouldn't think that we would want to,
And Henry Kissinger understands that.
or should want to.
Yeah, right. So that's why I'm not sure about Donald Trump's future. He may last 2 years, he may last 4 years.
Well, what do you think his motivation is with
Who,
this
Donald
Tillerson selection? And it being obviously, you talk about Tillerson's experience in oil diplomacy. Obviously, this pick is very motivated by the politics of oil,
yes,
especially in the
right.
Middle East and involving Russia.
That's right.
So what's the motivation here?
What is the motivation of
Yeah,
Trump? He wants a good Secretary of State. And his advisors, I don't know who it was, but his advisors, whether it was Pence or whether it was Kissinger, he did consult with Kissinger,
Does it indicate to you at all? I mean, the last time that we saw a Republican president install an oil man in a high office of power, we went adventuring into the Middle East to secure oil, in Iraq.
What are we
I'm
talking
referring to George W. Bush appointing, selecting Dick Cheney.
George Bush was elected president.
Dick Cheney as his
George-
vice president, Halliburton,
Yeah,
and us going into Iraq.
Okay, George Bush
motivated by oil interests.
George Bush had two of these.
You don't have any similar fears
Wait,
with Rex Tillerson?
let's talk about George Bush. George Bush inherited oil.
Right.
At the same time, he was elected president. So he had two factors in his own camp. Now, Trump is starting from the outside.
Right.
He
He's
never-
not an oil man himself.
He's not an oil man, and he's not had any experience in the State Department. Now, he has had some experience in Wall Street. He knows more about money than he was led to believe. He kept talking about sex. I think that was a smoke screen. He's got more money than Hillary thought he had.
Well,
And he has more money than his voters thought he had. So somebody advised him, well, you got to have oil on your side if you're going to win. And I think Tillerson was a good pick over the other nominees.
you don't think that Tillerson will be using the levers of power in the State Department for private oil interests?
He's going to make money, no doubt about that. Rockefeller made money. The oil companies always make money.
Yeah. Well, the last time that they went about doing that, it cost a lot of blood.
Now that's where Trump is going to have the decision. He has a decision. Let's end the Syrian war in 1 year, or let's it go on for 30 years. That's what Trump is going to have to decide. It's not going to be Tillerson. Tillerson say, I'm going to pump up the price as long as you want to. But I don't care whether you go to war or not. I'm going to sell more oil in any case.
Right.
He's got his own income,
Yeah.
no matter who wins.
And is that all right with you?
Well, it's. I have to accept it as a voter. All I'm saying, I just say a very limited thing. I think Tillerson was a better pick than Petraeus or Giuliani,
Yeah. Well, I agree with
and
that.
I think it's a step forward.
Robert, are
For the-
you prepared to talk about some of the other picks?
I don't know anything about the others. Well, I've heard this military guy. What's his-
Maddox. Yeah, I think so.
Now my son.
Oh, Jeff Sessions is going to be the Attorney General.
Well, Jeff Sessions was Trump's.
Freudian slip.
There you
Yeah,
go.
Freudian slip. Jeff Sessions was Trump's major ally. He comes from Alabama.
Yeah.
He's worried about immigration. He does not want more Mexicans to come and cut down the price of labor in his state.
Right.
So he wants that wall in Mexico as his number one priority. And Sessions was the first one to endorse Trump. And he's got his reward. What's he appointed as?
Attorney General.
Attorney General.
Yeah, now I don't know what he's going to do with the Attorney General, except he can enforce the law
Yeah.
and he can try and lead the administration away from Russia and toward Mexico. If we're gonna use any war, let's go to war against Mexico, not Iraq.
Yeah.
He's not going to be for a continuation of the war in the Middle East. It's not going to profit him any, and it's not going to profit the people of Alabama any. So some people want to go to war in Russia, and I think they're fools. Some people want to go to Russia in Syria, and I think they're fools. I think they should try and end war in both fields
Right.
and prevent war.
Yeah.
I have a wide variety of concerns over almost every single one of Donald Trump's cabinet picks.
Well, there's some other generals.
We have an
there,
attorney
too.
general who doesn't believe in the Civil Rights Act,
Well, he's
tasked
from
with
Alabama.
protecting
He's
the
a
civil
Alabama,
rights law.
naturally.
We have an EPA director who doesn't believe in protecting the environment,
Perry.
who's going to be heading the EPA. We have a labor secretary who's violated labor laws, who's going to be in charge of enforcing labor laws. We have
Democracy's in trouble. Democracy is in
we
trouble.
have
I made a
a
mistake. I think it's Rick Perry's the Energy Secretary.
no, I'm talking about the labor secretary,
Oh,
the fast
labor
food
secretary.
CEO who
Okay.
violated labor laws, who will now be in charge of enforcing those same laws. And you could go on with almost every single selection. He's chosen someone to head the agency that has interests directly against the agency that they're supposed to be in charge of. I find it deeply troubling. It's almost as though, like, when I turn on the news, I expect to hear that the Twilight Zone gremlin on the wing of the airplane is going to be appointed to director of the FAA.
Perhaps.
I
That's
have
the
deep
amateur-
concerns
that's the
over every
amateur-
single one of them.
That's the amateur real estate dealer.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me
Well, there's
to
other
fit-
people helping him make these picks. I mean,
Yeah.
So.
It seems to me that he's doing his best to render government as dysfunctional as Republicans like to claim that it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's very simple. Greed. It's very simple. The Republicans' greed won. Trump didn't win. The Republican Party won and plutocracy won.
Yeah.
They
Well,
got-
that's, yeah.
They're going to lower taxes for the rich and raise taxes on the poor.
It's going to be disastrous. We're seeing that in Ohio. John Kasich just did that in Ohio over the past 7 years, I guess I should say, 6, 7 years. And now we're facing massive budget shortfalls.
Right.
And what is their response? They're talking about giving another $264 million tax break to oil and gas companies. So I don't know how much evidence, how many times do you have to continue to try this wrong, disastrous method? And I'm actually become convinced that they know that trickle-down economics doesn't work and they don't care. They're not interested
They're too stupid.
in it working. They
Marx said it many years ago. Under capitalism, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
right.
It's coming to pass.
Well,
I think we should reread Marx.
It doesn't much matter if trickle-down economics works, does it? Because if they get their tax cuts, they get the deregulation of their businesses. When recession hits, wealth accumulates into the hands of the few, as it always does. And then they get to slash and burn all the government agencies and social services that they don't believe in anyway.
Well, they hope to be that few that you talk about. That's them. They're hoping.
Well, yeah,
concerned about
exactly.
you two guys, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, to them, it's the best of it. It doesn't matter if trickle-down works or not.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump's tax plan is going to cost $7 trillion. Well, there's no way to budget that unless you use magical asterisks like they do with dynamic scoring.
This is up to the Federal Reserve Bank.
So he's going to explode the debt.
They can kick the can down the road another 3 months.
They can continue to suppress the interest rates. But his plan, if it goes through, is just going to explode the debt even further. But to the tune of $7 trillion is what he's proposed. There's no way to square that. Now, they always say that it's all going to come back to us because the economic stimulation that occurs when you give away all these tax breaks is going to revive the economy to a point that it's going to make up the revenue. Well, it doesn't. It never does. 40 years of empirical evidence shows that never happens. And you could go, not just on the national level with the Reagan tax cuts and the Bush tax cuts where we saw that didn't work. You could go to the individual states, such as Ohio recently with John Kasich's experiment, or Kansas, which is floundering because of all that Sam Brownback did there. Over and over again, this doesn't work, and yet people continue to buy into it. The mind it boggles.
Well, it's propaganda. Who controls the media?
The few. The few to whom the wealth accumulates.
Well, you have a media empire, which is a little bit different than the oil empire.
Right.
And Hillary had...
But no less exclusive.
Yeah. Hillary had the backing of the New York Times, the Washington Post, most of the newspapers, and Hollywood. But she didn't play her cards right.
Robert, we were talking about, some people were actually shocked on November 8th. I think the media, excluding David here, was probably part of all that.
Sure.
They were, I honestly do, I talked to people who honestly could not believe what happened. And I do believe that they were being misled by the news reporting and everything.
Absolutely. You see,
and another thing was they don't bother to read between the lines or for themselves. They just left it up to television.
You see, what TV media does is to keep the Democrats and Republicans close. So if it's close,
that's better for ratings.
It's better for both sides. The Republicans have put more money in to catch up to the Democrats, or the Democrats have put more money to catch up to the Republicans. So the media were manipulating both Hillary Clinton, and there's a good one, Hillary Trump on the same page. They're being manipulated by the media.
We don't have much time to go. I watched part of the speech, his thank you speech in Alabama a couple days ago. And he made the joke.
This is Sessions, or?
This is, Sessions was there. Jeff Sessions was there.
Trump made a special trip to Sessions.
He went to Alabama as a thank you.
Part of his
thank you tour. But anyway, what happened was he said when the Clinton camp found out that they weren't going to win, Trump had one of his help call, because they had all these $1 million worth of fireworks they were going to set off. I can't remember if he said he offered them a nickel or if it was 15 cents on the dollar for those fireworks. And they hung up on them. So, but anyway, we're getting down here to the wire.
Okay.
We probably only got a couple more minutes to go, so you
Well,
want to comment on that? Or?
I think there was a little bit of a disconnect between David and I. I was interested in following the theme of the balance of power as a historian down to the qualifications of Trump and his lack of understanding of the four major factors of power. And that's all I really wanted to say. But David is interested in projecting into the next administration and how well these appointees will do, and he kind of predicts a disaster, I guess. Let's get your summary of what we tried to do today.
Well, I'm hesitant to make a prediction. I don't want to say that the sky is falling, but all the indications to me are that it doesn't look good. To me, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to put people in charge of agencies who have a history of violating those agencies' rules and laws and ethics. And it seems to me if you put the fox in charge of the hen house,
right,
you
exactly.
shouldn't
Just might have
be
an
optimistic
ulterior
for the
motive,
safety of your chickens.
That's
and
what some
hens.
people have suggested, that perhaps these guys have ulterior motives.
Right.
And they would have ulterior
But
motives.
of course, that's the journalist in me projecting into the future, I suppose. So there's a chance that Mr. Trump will prove me woefully wrong, and if I have to
Right.
eat crow,
Right.
kindly sprinkle it with Italian seasoning.
Okay.
Well, anyway, thanks for coming. We have to keep the debate going.
Thank you for having me, Professor.
And I don't know what our next show will be or when it will be.
Yes.
We'll have to discuss that off
I just
camera.
wanted to
All
mention
right.
before you go that David had mentioned something about the sky falling. I heard it was going to fall over Athens.